I messaged the family group chat. I'm receiving an award tonight. It would mean a lot if you came. My sister replied, we're going to a concert instead. My parents added, don't guilt us. I just wrote back, all right. That evening, what they saw on live TV made their jaws drop. I, 32M, stared at my phone screen, reading the messages in our family group chat for the third time. The blue light illuminated my face in the dim hotel room as I processed what I'd just seen. My sister had replied first. She and her husband were going to some concert instead. Then my parents chimed in, telling me not to guilt them. Not to guilt them. I set the phone down on the nightstand and laughed, though nothing about it was funny. The award ceremony was in 6 hours. I'd sent that message 3 days ago, giving them plenty of notice. But apparently, a cover band playing at some outdoor venue 2 hours from their house was more important than watching their son receive one of the most prestigious honors in investigative journalism. I typed back a single word, all right, and turned off my phone. The thing was, I'd stopped expecting anything from them years ago. This wasn't new. This was the pattern of my entire life, refined and perfected over 3 decades. My sister had always been the golden child, and I'd always been the one who was just sort of there, occupying space, breathing their air, requiring their money for food and clothes and school supplies. They never said it outright, but I felt it in every interaction, every missed soccer game, every parent-teacher conference they couldn't quite make it to because something else always came up. When I was 15, I placed first in the state science fair. My parents had promised they'd come to the award ceremony. I'd worked on that project for 8 months, barely sleeping, testing and retesting my hypothesis about water contamination in our town's older neighborhoods. The day of the ceremony, they called to say my sister had a dance recital that ran late. They'd try to make it if they could. They didn't make it. I stood on that stage, accepted my trophy, and scanned the audience for faces I knew wouldn't be there. That was the moment something hardened inside me. Not bitterness, exactly. More like clarity. I started documenting everything after that. Not obsessively, just methodically. I kept every report card, every certificate, every piece of evidence that I existed and achieved things. When I got a full scholarship to a prestigious university, I framed the letter. When I won my first journalism award at 24, I saved the newspaper clipping. Not for them, for me. Proof that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't imagining the imbalance. My sister graduated with a communications degree she barely used. My parents threw her a massive party, invited everyone they knew, rented out a restaurant. When I graduated summa cum laude with a double major, they took me to dinner at a chain restaurant and spent most of it talking about my sister's new boyfriend. I smiled through the whole meal. I'd already learned not to expect anything different. The years rolled on. I moved across the country for work, chasing stories that mattered. I broke a major corruption scandal when I was 28 that led to 3 city officials resigning. My parents sent a text, proud of you. 3 words. My sister got engaged around the same time, and suddenly our family chat exploded with wedding planning details for 18 months straight. I was asked to be an usher, not a groomsman. I accepted without complaint. I dated, had relationships that fizzled out, mostly because I was married to my work. Journalism isn't a career that rewards work-life balance, especially not the kind I did. I spent weeks embedded in communities, investigating stories that people didn't want told. I slept in my car, ate gas station food, interviewed people who threatened me, and followed leads that sometimes went nowhere. But when they did go somewhere, when the truth finally came out, it felt like the only thing in my life that made sense. 3 months before that night, I'd broken the biggest story of my career. It started with a tip about a pharmaceutical company suppressing research on contaminated drug supplies. What I uncovered was bigger than I'd imagined. A network of corruption involving corporate executives, government regulators, and a cover-up that had potentially harmed thousands of patients. The investigation took 14 months. I worked with a team of researchers, lawyers, and whistleblowers who risked everything to help me. When the story finally published, it created shockwaves. Congressional hearings were announced. Criminal investigations were opened, and I was nominated for the Freeman Award. The Freeman Award wasn't some participation trophy. It was given to one journalist per year for work that demonstrated exceptional courage and impact. Previous winners had exposed war crimes, government surveillance programs, and corporate malfeasance that changed laws. The ceremony was televised nationally, broadcast live on one of the major news networks. When I got the call that I'd won, I sat in my apartment alone and cried. Not because my family would finally be proud. I'd given up on that. But because it meant something I'd done actually mattered. I called my parents first, told them about the award, explained what it meant, mentioned the ceremony would be televised. My mother congratulated me, said it sounded wonderful. She asked if I'd talked to my sister lately. I said no. She suggested I call her, said she'd been stressed about the twins starting preschool. I promised I would and ended the call. 3 days before the ceremony, I sent that message to the family group chat. I kept it simple, factual. I didn't plead or beg. I just stated what was happening and said it would mean a lot if they came. I watched the 3 dots appear as my sister typed. Then her message came through about the concert. My parents added their response minutes later. Don't guilt us. Those 3 words unlocked something I'd kept carefully locked away. Not anger. I was past anger. Something colder. More calculated. I got up from the hotel bed and opened my laptop. I pulled up the email from the ceremony organizers and scanned through the details again. The event would be broadcast live starting at 8 p.m. Eastern. There would be a cocktail hour, dinner, several smaller awards presented, and then the Freeman Award as the finale. Each winner gave a brief acceptance speech, typically 3 to 5 minutes. The organizers had asked me to prepare remarks. I opened a blank document and started typing. The ceremony began exactly on time. I sat at a table near the front with other nominees and past winners, people whose work I'd admired for years. The room was filled with journalists, editors, publishers, and industry leaders. Cameras were positioned throughout the venue, capturing every moment for the live broadcast. I barely touched my dinner. My stomach was twisted in knots, but not from nervousness about the award. I kept checking my watch, calculating the time zones, imagining my family wherever they were. My sister was probably at that concert by now, drinking overpriced beer and swaying to music she'd forget by tomorrow. My parents were likely with her, enjoying the evening air, the crowd, the normalcy of it all. None of them thinking about me. The smaller awards were presented throughout the dinner. Each winner approached the podium, gave their speech, posed for photos. The energy in the room built steadily. Finally, around 9:30 p.m., the host took the microphone to introduce the Freeman Award. He gave a brief history of the honor, mentioned past winners, then started describing this year's winning investigation. He talked about the pharmaceutical scandal, the months of work, the impact of the reporting. Then he said my name. I stood up. The room applauded. I walked to the podium, shook the host's hand, accepted the Crystal Award. It was heavier than I expected. The applause continued as I set it on the podium and adjusted the microphone. I looked out at the audience, then up at the cameras. One had a red light glowing. Live. Broadcasting into millions of homes across the country. I began by thanking the Freeman Committee, my editors, my sources, everyone who'd made the investigation possible. Standard acceptance speech material. People in the audience nodded along. Then I paused, took a breath, and shifted direction. I talked about what drove me to journalism in the first place. That science fair project when I was 15, discovering that the water in low-income neighborhoods was contaminated while wealthier areas were fine. Standing on a stage just like this one, holding a trophy, looking for my parents in an audience where they weren't. Realizing that the truth mattered, even when no one you loved was there to witness it. I kept my voice steady, factual. I explained that I'd invited my family to attend tonight. Sent them a message 3 days ago. My sister chose a concert instead. My parents told me not to guilt them. I smiled at the camera and said that was fine. I understood priorities differ. But I wanted them to know, and I wanted everyone watching to know, what those priorities had meant over the years. Then I pulled out the pages I'd prepared. Printed copies of every achievement they'd missed, every moment they'd chosen something else. The state science fair. My high school graduation where I gave the valedictorian speech to an audience that didn't include them because my sister had a softball tournament. My university acceptance letter with a full scholarship. My first journalism award. The corruption story that changed my city's government. Every birthday after I turned 12 when they forgot to call because they were busy with my sister's life. I didn't read every item. That would have taken an hour. I just highlighted enough to establish the pattern. The cameras stayed on me the entire time. I could see people in the audience shifting, some looking uncomfortable, others leaning forward. I wasn't angry. I wasn't yelling. I was simply stating facts, the same way I would for any investigation. I explained that I'd tried for years to be enough. Good enough grades, big enough achievements, important enough work. But I'd finally realized the problem wasn't me. Some families just work differently. Some parents love their children equally, and some don't, no matter how much they claim otherwise. Some siblings become your best friends, and others see you as competition they've already won. That was fine. I'd made peace with it. What I hadn't made peace with was the pretending. The polite family dinners where everyone acted like things were normal. The group chat messages about trivial things while my life's biggest moments passed unacknowledged. The guilt trips. Yes, I said that word deliberately, looking right at the camera, whenever I expressed any disappointment about being consistently deprioritized. So I was done pretending, done being quiet, done protecting their comfort at the expense of my truth. I held up the Freeman Award, this physical proof that my work mattered to someone, even if it didn't matter to them. I thanked the committee again. I thanked everyone who'd supported me throughout my career. And then I looked directly into the camera and said that my family was probably at a concert right now, and I genuinely hoped they were enjoying themselves, because this was the last time their absence would affect me at all. I walked off the stage to complete silence. Then someone started clapping. Then someone else. Within seconds, the entire room was on their feet. I made it back to my table, set the award down, and finally let myself breathe. My phone had been off since that afternoon. I turned it back on around midnight, after the ceremony ended, and I'd made it through the reception and back to my hotel room. The messages loaded slowly. Hundreds of them. The family group chat had exploded. My sister had sent the first message around 9:40 p.m. She'd written that she couldn't believe I'd embarrassed them like that on national television. My parents had chimed in minutes later, saying I'd humiliated the entire family. How could I be so cruel? They'd always supported me. I was being ungrateful and vindictive. Then came messages from extended family members. Aunts, uncles, cousins I barely knew. Some defended my parents, said I was out of line. Others said they'd always suspected something was off about how I was treated. One cousin sent a private message saying she'd recorded my speech, and it was the bravest thing she'd ever seen. Friends from college reached out. Former colleagues. People I'd interviewed years ago. My inbox was flooded. Social media had caught fire. Clips of my speech were everywhere, being shared and discussed and debated. Some people call me petty. Others call me honest. The story became national news itself. Think pieces about family dynamics and favoritism and what children owe their parents. I read through everything with a strange detachment. Then I did something I'd been planning since the moment I read that group chat message 3 days ago. I typed out one final response to my family. I told them I hadn't embarrassed them. I told the truth. If the truth was embarrassing, that said something about their behavior, not mine. I explained that I was done participating in the fiction that we were a close, loving family. They were welcome to continue that narrative among themselves, but I wouldn't be part of it anymore. I wished them well. Then I left the group chat. I blocked my parents' numbers, blocked my sister, blocked anyone who'd sent me messages defending their behavior. It felt like setting down something heavy I'd been carrying for so long I'd forgotten it was weighing me down. Update 1. The speech went viral in ways I never anticipated. Within 48 hours, it had been viewed over 20 million times. Major news outlets wanted interviews. Talk shows called. A literary agent reached out about writing a book. I declined most of it. The point had never been fame or attention. It was about refusing to be silent anymore. My parents tried calling from different numbers. I didn't answer. They sent emails that I deleted without reading. My sister created a new social media account to message me, saying I'd destroyed our family. I blocked that too. Some people might call that cold. I called it self-preservation. What surprised me most was how many people reached out with their own stories. Thousands of messages from people who'd experienced similar dynamics in their families. The scapegoat child. The forgotten one. The person who achieved everything and still wasn't enough. They thanked me for saying what they'd never been able to say. Some were crying when they called. Others were angry at their own families, finally giving themselves permission to feel what they'd suppressed for years. 3 weeks after the ceremony, my parents showed up at my apartment building. The doorman called up. I'd given him their photos and instructions not to let them up. He asked if I wanted him to send them away. I considered it, then told him to tell them I had nothing to say. He did. They left. My sister tried a different approach. She reached out through an old mutual friend, asking if we could talk. The friend admitted my sister had been crying for days, said she never realized how I felt, wanted to make things right. I told the friend that feelings don't change history, and I wasn't interested in a reconciliation built on public embarrassment rather than genuine remorse. If my sister had cared, she would have cared before the entire country watched me explain why she didn't. Work became my sanctuary again. I took on a new investigation, something that would require months of research and careful reporting. My editor asked if I needed time off to deal with everything. I told him the best thing I could do was focus on what I was good at, finding truth in places people wanted to keep it hidden. Update 2. 6 months passed. The viral nature of my speech eventually faded, replaced by newer scandals and stories. My life returned to something resembling normal, except now it was a normal I'd chosen rather than one imposed on me by family obligation. I met someone during that time. Another journalist, someone who understood the obsessive nature of the work, the irregular hours, the constant travel. We'd known each other professionally for years, but something shifted after the ceremony. She'd been in the audience that night. She told me later that watching me speak was watching someone finally choose themselves, and she found that impossibly attractive. We took things slowly. I'd spent so long being unwanted by the people who were supposed to want me that accepting genuine interest felt foreign. But she was patient. She understood that trust wasn't something I gave easily, and she didn't push. My family made one more attempt to reach out around the holidays. A letter arrived, handwritten by my mother. She wrote about how much they missed me, how family was supposed to forgive, how I was breaking her heart. She didn't apologize for any specific thing, didn't acknowledge the pattern I described. Just asked me to come home for Christmas, said my sister's twins were asking about me. I almost laughed at that last part. The twins barely knew me. I'd been excluded from most family gatherings involving them. But even now, even after everything, they were trying to use guilt to manipulate me back into place. I wrote a response, short and clear. I explained that forgiveness required acknowledgement of wrongdoing, and I'd seen none of that. I said that missing someone and treating them well were different things, and they'd had 32 years to figure that out. I told them I hoped they had a good holiday, and I meant it. I wanted them to be happy. I just didn't need to be part of that happiness anymore, and they didn't get to be part of mine. I didn't send the letter. I burned it in my sink and washed the ashes down the drain. They didn't deserve even that much of my energy. Update 3. A year after the ceremony, I won another major award. This one wasn't televised, but it was significant in the industry. The woman I'd been seeing was there, sitting in the audience, beaming at me. Some of my colleagues were there. My editor, who'd supported me through every difficult investigation. People who'd chosen to be in my life, who'd shown up consistently, who celebrated my successes without making them about themselves. When I gave my acceptance speech, I kept it brief. I thanked the people who mattered. I didn't mention my family at all. Their absence didn't define me anymore. Afterward, at the reception, someone asked if I regretted the Freeman speech, if I thought I'd been too harsh. I considered the question seriously. Then I said no. The only thing I regretted was waiting so long to tell the truth. Life continued. I bought a house. The woman I'd been seeing moved in. We adopted a dog, a scruffy mutt from a shelter who'd been overlooked by everyone else. We named him something ridiculous and loved him completely. I kept working on investigations that mattered, stories that changed things, truth that needed telling. My phone never rang with calls from my parents anymore. The group chat stayed silent on my end. I'd never rejoined. Social media showed me occasional glimpses of my sister's life through mutual connections, pictures of birthday parties and family gatherings I wasn't part of. It didn't hurt the way it once would have. It was just information, neutral and distant. Sometimes people asked if I missed them. I told them the truth. I missed the idea of them. The parents and sister I'd wanted them to be. But I didn't miss who they actually were, how they actually treated me. You can't miss something you never really had. The speech became something I was known for beyond my journalism. People still referenced it, used it as shorthand for standing up to family dysfunction. It made some people uncomfortable. The idea that you could choose to walk away from family, that blood relation didn't obligate you to accept mistreatment. But it resonated with others who'd lived similar experiences. I never regretted it. Not the speech itself, not the fallout, not the permanent severing of those relationships. Because the truth was, they'd severed the relationship years ago through their consistent choices. I just finally acknowledged it publicly instead of carrying the weight of their rejection privately. That award ceremony, that moment on stage with cameras broadcasting to millions, wasn't about revenge. It was about refusing to be invisible anymore. About saying, loudly and clearly, that I existed, that I mattered, that my achievements were real even if my family never treated them as such. And in the end, that was enough.